I'm going to go ahead and call us to order and declare a quorum of 6 members present. Item C1, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to setting a date for the next management oversight workshop to discuss purchasing. Dr. Ely.
Mr. Harris, members of the board, as you are aware, we have a local board policy and whereby we spend once every 3 years, we look over one of 6 areas of that the district spends a lot of money in, like technology and purchasing and construction and facilities maintenance. And we twice a year we get together and spend roughly 2 hours together and take a deep dive look into the inner workings of these various departments. We call them management oversight workshops, and we try to have one usually about October-ish in the fall and one somewhere around April in the spring. This last year we moved the spring one a little bit later. You may recall we moved that into June because we were going through boundary adjustment at that time. So it is now the beginning of a new school year, and we have purchasing that is up, is the next one up for a management oversight workshop. So we'd like to see if we can set a date and time for us to have about 2 hours together to discuss purchasing in College Station ISD. With that, we will be together a lot in October. Pretty much every Monday we will be together. We've thought about maybe doing one later in October, perhaps on a Thursday. When we get into November, then we've got Thanksgiving to deal with. We also have election and changing of a board member will be occurring. So want to know if we wanted to try to schedule it for either very early November or late October. If you've got dates that work for you, I'll throw it open to you, Mr. Harris.
Okay, I can, as a general rule, Thursday evening and Friday evening do not work well for me. But are we talking midday?
We can do whatever works for everyone. We could do a lunchtime 11:30 to 1:30. We could do an early afternoon 3 to 5. We could do an evening.
Okay.
Though I'd like Ms. Barrett to have the enjoyment of doing these one more time.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
I'm all about.
Is your microphone on?
I was saying that I'd like to maybe see if Ms. Barrett would like to do this one more time.
Oh, that'd be awesome. What is it about?
Purchasing.
That's my favorite, purchasing. Purchasing. I love purchasing.
So how about
Thursday the 18th? October.
If we do that, can it be in during the day?
Sure.
My 15th anniversary.
The 18th?
Yes.
Well, let's move it then.
how does the 23rd? That's a Tuesday.
Works for me.
Wait.
You?
I'm good.
16th.
I'll just see if I can move up. I'll just see if I can move that.
So anybody saying the 23rd will not work? Ms. Barrett?
No, we're making.
I was actually really joking, though, if.
No. We'll make. I'll see what I can move.
So we'll pencil in, and we don't have Mr. Nugent. So,
We'll pencil that in.
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
You good? 11:30 to 1:30?
11:30 to 1:30? On Tuesday, October 23rd. Okay. We will find that out. We will figure out where later.
Purchasing start.
Okay, I should write this down. Tuesday, 10/23.
Tuesday, October 23rd, 11:30 to 1:30. Location to be determined.
Yes, sir. That's what we've got
All right,
penciled in.
sure. And you'll circulate, maybe do that by email. That way Mr. Nugent can respond.
Yes, sir. We can do that.
Great. Anything else on C1?
No, sir.
Okay, item C2, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to CSISD's 2019 legislative priorities. Dr. Ely.
Excellent. I've got draft language here that I will pass around to everyone. We also have it up here on the screen for those in the audience to be able to see, kind of broken down in a particular areas of focus. This is our first stab at legislative priorities for the 86th Texas Legislature, which will be convening, I believe it is January the 8th. For 140 days, and there'll be a lot of things I think that we would like to see added, some of the things that we would like to see not taken away. And sort of just to start the conversation, I've put this down into, I guess, 5 different areas. So I'll go with the first one here, which is, I guess I should put it in present mode. That'd be better. So the first, obviously, is probably no surprise. It's talking about funding adequately and equitably schools in the state of Texas. The first bullet we have on here for your consideration discussion is to increase the basic allotment and equalize wealth level to provide more resources for all Texas public schools. That is the one way that the legislature could put more money in every Texas school district, is if they increase the basic allotment. Right now, that's $5,140 per child. And because the basic allotment is $5,140 per child, the equalized wealth level is 100 times that, or $514,000 per ADA. What that means is if the equalized wealth level were to go up because the basic allotment went up, we would owe less in recapture. It would allow College Station ISD to keep more of our local taxpayer money in the district and be able to be utilized for our kids in the school district.
Has that number been going up with inflation or the rise in property values?
No, sir, it has not. And you have maybe looked at bullet number 2 there to talk about indexing that number with some type of measure of inflation. That actually just gets decided upon when new school funding legislation is enacted. So that number of 5140, it doesn't get to be decided on by TEA each year or each biennium. That's the number that is in statute right now. So for that to change, the actual statute would have to change, and that's where we get bullet number 2. We would love to see that indexed to some sort of value growth. The value growth predicted statewide for the next biennium is, I read the other day, is 6.8% increase in state property value growth across Texas. And so right now, in the way the legislation is written, it does, the basic allotment or equalized wealth level do not get to go up with a rise in local property value.
Do you know how long that number's been? How long the number has been 5,140? Do you have a clue?
2 sessions ago? Couple sessions, I believe. I can't remember if it
not
was a
in the
2015 or
last 5 years.
2013.
Less.
Can you use your microphone, please? Mr. Martindale said he believes it's been that way at least 4 years, so 2 more sessions.
Okay.
So that kind of gets into item number 3, which talks about greater state budget transparency and the use of local school property taxes as a revenue source for the Texas General Fund budget. We've talked about that on a number of occasions. Members of this board have expressed their concern with this at different times throughout our discussions on various budget-related items. But the fact of the matter is that the state has been living off the increase in local property values and those local taxes going back to the state in various forms. As I mentioned, the projected 6.8% increase in property value statewide over the next biennium. TEA just made their LAR, or legislative appropriations request. That's how much they ask the state for in money. And they have asked for $3.5 billion less for next biennium than they have asked for in this biennium. Now, that number is subject to change. This is their initial request. And you may be asking, why is the Texas Education Agency pinching pennies, and why are they asking for less money rather than more? Well, they're following the code, the Texas Education Code, because how they figure this appropriation request is they see how much of it is available through local tax dollars that go back to the state, then whatever is needed to make up the difference is a part of the LAR, or the appropriations request. So we would definitely like to see that transparency be more realized at the state level. And I don't know if you want to put stronger language in there. I have, for this first go around, I've resisted the language talking about increasing the state share of the cost of educating public school students. While that is important, there's a couple different ways to increase the state share. You can always reduce other amounts of input into the system, so the state share, while staying the same in true dollars, the percentage gets bigger, if you understand what I'm saying. So we would like to see more money into the system and more money coming from the state. That can be accomplished through raising the basic allotment. Okay. Questions and comments so far? Okay. Item 4, again, these are just bullet points to discuss, and love to hear your thoughts on this. Safety is an important component of what we do here in College Station ISD and in all 1,000+ school districts across the state. Both the governor and the commissioner have done a lot to talk about safety over the past 6 months since the tragedy in Florida and in Santa Fe, Texas. One of the things that we realize as we've been looking at it in a school district as well is there's some things that you can do that are one-time costs, but for true meaningful change, there's a lot of things that will come only when you get recurring costs through additional staffing. What do you think of staffing of school resource deputies or school resource officers or mental health counselors or additional school counselors or any of those types of things? We would love to have the ability to pay for those ongoing costs in a way that can be sustained over the next several years. So what we threw out here is the idea of supporting an additional penny per $100 of valuation on the maintenance and operations budget to be dedicated to pay for the ongoing safety-related school costs. And so this would be an additional penny at the discretion of the locally elected school boards, not subject to an election and not subject to recapture. So the ability to go to $1.05 if the school board so chose to do so, and all that money, those proceeds dedicated from that penny, would be for these safety-related costs.
I think it's important that you put the word dedicated in that sentence.
Okay.
All right, I want to talk about this one too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
I just think if this is going to be, is that going to be enough to help the district? Number one would be my first question. And then I think it is important that it's strong in the sense of it is dedicated for that, so that, I mean, to me, that one could gain traction just simply because the governor feels so strongly about it as well. Mm-hmm. And it certainly would help alleviate some of what we're having to use now in order, it end up helping us in the end in some other areas if we can dedicate that amount of money towards safety.
Yeah, to me, I'd like to see a different source than adding an additional burden to our local taxpayers, since we're going to be sending $14.6 million back to the state. If there's a way maybe to reduce the recapture payment in lieu of adding an additional burden to local taxpayers, why don't we let them keep more of their own money and spend it on safety and security in their own district? I would prefer some approach like that, whether it's some basic increase on the basic allotment.
I like that better.
But I do think, yeah, in adding dedicated language, I think everybody would support that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only catch being that there's a bunch of districts who obviously don't have recapture payments and couldn't take advantage of that.
So it could be an either or.
You're thinking of the state as a whole, yeah. I imagine we could find a lot of good ways to spend $14.6 million of local taxpayer money on school safety-related issues. Not all of it, just some of it.
Right.
So one of the things that we'll see as the legislative session unfolds is what types of bills and what type of language is going to get traction and what won't. This type of method for increasing money for school safety may not get any traction at all, but others may. And so these will obviously be kind of guides as we go through and have our discussions with legislatures prior to the session, but we can go back and work on some language. So I've seen some other examples out there from different organizations, and a lot of it is more of the just increase the state share of public education and have the state pay for safety adjustments to local school districts. I think one of the things about doing it this way, there's pros and cons, is it captures the ongoing nature of some of the costs, which I think many districts are finding a little bit more prohibitive. But we'll go back and wordsmith this based on your feedback.
Okay.
Any more on that one? And the last one is, we just added this one this morning. It's basically the concept of adjusting the various allotments and the various cost of education indexes that are out there to reflect the true cost of educating various students. Many of those have not been updated since the 1980s, some not since the early 2000s. There is a move afoot based on one of the interim subcommittees that has just finished their work to look at completely overhauling the Texas public school funding system. Don't know how much traction that will get because there's not an additional, I don't know that there's an additional political will out there right now to add additional state funding into the system. So it would just be reapportioning existing revenues that are available and appropriating them in a different fashion. So they have talked about getting rid of various allotments and indexes and increasing basic allotments and folding some of these things in to different tiers of state funding. So I don't know what's going to happen with that either. This was kind of a nod to some of the language that we've used in the past to try to make sure that when we get transportation allotment that it more truly reflects the true cost of transporting children and those types of things. Questions on anything?
One of the questions I have in regards to the lawsuit that took place, do you think there's any, I think when the legislative session is not in session, that sometimes things, just because you don't have people there, that sometimes they think the problem goes away. But do you think there's any likelihood that there will be more in-depth, I know that there was that committee put together, but be more in-depth studies of different ways to equitably fund school?
So the lawsuit that you are referring to was actually settled, and the Supreme Court gave out their ruling in 2016 prior to the 2017 legislative session. A number of proposals were put forward during that legislative session, mainly on the House side, to add additional funding and equity to the Texas state funding system. None of those ended up prevailing. What we got out of that was an interim study, which is what has just been completed. I don't know what 2 years will bring as far as political will on the part of the legislature for wading in to school funding based on the other competing interests that they have. They have to fund an entire state budget when you have to think about all the things that go into that, higher education and other things as well. And they're still having to deal with Hurricane Harvey and the rebuild for that. So I don't know if there will be any political appetite to actually overhaul the system or increase funding in the system. I can remain hopeful that that will happen, but based on what we saw in 2017, I'm skeptical as to whether it will.
So that leads one to believe that this study they did is just to pacify, or what would one think?
We've done this state has done a few studies over the last couple decades to study school funding, and there's it does fulfill a need to look at what are some options out there that would allow the legislature to be able to put more money into the system or reapportion that in their minds in a way that would be more equitable for schools all across the system. But I think when you see the ongoing and increasing amount of burden for the support of public schools that has been put on the shoulders of local taxpayers, local school district taxpayers, it's becoming harder and harder in my opinion, for this current funding system to continue in the way that it is. However, it
When you
won't.
have all these schools that are going to start blowing through their fund balance, I mean, I don't know what kind of wake-up call that would send, but I mean, it's not just us. So the political appetite, I would think, would be at not just the school districts like us that are growing fast, but I mean, it's,
Mr. Schaefer, when Houston ISD, Austin ISD, Dallas ISD, all of them are Chapter 41 districts. They are property wealthy districts and are sending back hundreds of millions of dollars back to the state, one would think. I thought the Houston ISD one would be the big wake-up call that would cause some change to happen during the last legislative session. It ended up not happening. Seriously, unfortunately for the Gulf Coast and unfortunately for Houston and Harris County in particular, Harvey happened, and what that did had the effect of lowering a lot of people's business and home property values. So the big bill that Houston ISD was going to have to send to the state became smaller because their property values became smaller. And they lost some students, but not that many, if that makes sense. So I don't know. Mr. Martindale, you remember the number for Austin ISD
It's over 500 million.
that Austin is sending back? I don't know what will be the impetus to move the legislature forward in addressing this. But I think I sent an article out a couple weeks ago that more and more North Texas districts are now going to tax ratification elections, tax rate elections, TREs, to be able to move some more capacity over their maintenance and operations, taxing ability to be able to do things like fundraisers and healthcare for teachers and ISD staff. So. No, this is these will be the talking points that we will meet with not only our locally elected representatives, but others as well when we go to Austin to visit to talk about these things. So whatever we decide on putting up here will be important. Okay. Anything else on adequate and equitable funding? Okay, moving on to the next one is talking about taking resources from public schools through voucher and private school choice plans or charter schools. We've got three things on here as a starting point for conversation. First is do not approve any plan, and what we're talking about here are vouchers, educational savings accounts, tax credits, taxpayer savings grants, tuition reimbursements. They seem to get called different things each legislative session. Do not approve. We ask the legislature not to approve any of those plans that take money out of the public school system and gives them to private schools or home schools, those that have little or no academic or financial accountability to the state, the taxpayers, or local communities. We're asking that public school taxes stay for the public schools and not go to private or home schools. Okay. Second one has to do with charter schools, and we would oppose the further expansion of charter schools. And charter schools can expand in two ways. One, additional charters can be granted by the state. I believe they're at about 200 or so, plus or minus, charters at the state level right now. But also existing charters can be expanded by adding additional campuses. For example, the one that moved in locally has a number of campuses all over the state. They expanded their charter that they had initially in the North Texas area to open here. So we would oppose a further expansion of charter schools, including increases in the number of campuses under existing charters, unless they are subject to the same accountability and transparency rules as traditional public schools, including but not limited to public notices, school discipline, transportation, bilingual programs, policy notices, employment contract policies, special education requirements, lunch programs, nepotism statutes, things like that. So trying to equalize the playing field was what we're really getting at right there. And the last one would be support charter school legislation that strengthens notification requirements for new campus openings and student leaver reportings. Oftentimes, local school districts are not aware that charter schools are coming into the area because of notification requirements. And we found it certainly very difficult for us with the opening of the charter school in this area to report student leavers and how we're actually being affected, us, Brian, other school districts, with additional campuses coming to town. So, questions on those? All right. Third area is talking about assessment and accountability system, and a little bit about state standards. So the first bullet we have here is to advocate for the establishment of a comprehensive accountability system that looks beyond high stakes multiple choice exams to meaningful assessments that have value for students, parents, and teachers, as well as measures what each community deems important in promoting college and career readiness. And we would oppose A through F campus and district ratings. So that's a bit more encompassing language there, but what we're getting at is the concept that we have embraced, College Station ISD, of community-based accountability, and having the state embrace that as well, and look at a system that, like we are working on in this district, that reflects the community's values and beliefs and goals and dreams for their school kids, and is not nearly solely reliant on a state mandated assessment. So much more encompassing than that. Don't know if 2019 is going to be the time where we actually see that. We are very hopeful that by 2021 we'll be able to make much more headway on that, especially with our work with the Texas Public Accountability Consortium that CSISD is a member of. But we did want to have a nod to the concept of community-based accountability systems. The second one is to reduce the state-mandated tests in grades 3 through 8, and those tests required by the federal Every Student Succeeds Act that was passed a little over a year ago. It's federal legislation, and they actually have fewer required tests than the state does. In 3 through 8, reading and math are required, plus a science test in 5th grade and 8th grade. It's actually somewhere between 3rd and 5th grade, and 6th and 9th grade is when science tests are required at the federal level. We in the state do those in 5th grade and 8th grade. What is not on there that we require at the state level is the writing assessments that are given at both 4th grade and 7th grade, and the social studies assessment that's given in 8th grade. And so this is language similar to what we had 2 years ago to reduce that. So that may be familiar to you. And also this last one is language that we had last time as well in 2017. That's to reduce the number of curricular standards assessed on the State of Texas Assessment of Academic Readiness, or STAR test, for accountability purposes. And the reason we want to reduce the number of curricular standards assessed, it would allow our teachers to teach to greater depth instead of having to cover so many standards at every tested grade level. So, and give us a little bit more latitude and flexibility to cover those.
This may be related to the second point, but the fact that every student is to be tested, I mean, it seems to me that we could make use of statistical sampling and cut cost dramatically and obtain the same type of information, and then let our teachers evaluate each student in terms of what is right for that student, so that the state accountability is met in a much more cost-effective way. I don't know if there's any push at all to that, and I know there's a lot of pushback from the testing industry, but it does seem like we're to the point where we could make use of that. And then the other thing is, and I'm not exactly sure how to word it, but some way, maybe it's under the community accountability standards, but I keep going back to our situation in math, kind of in the intermediate and middle schools, where we have a whole lot of advanced kids that we basically pull out of our results for these grade level exams because they're 1, 2, or 3 years advanced, and they don't count then. So we're basically taking who would be clearly the top performers out of the mix and then saying go, and then let's evaluate what we're doing based on that. Well, that doesn't make any sense from a state accountability standard, so some way to account for that. Otherwise, I guess we could just teach to the test and have all those kids go back and take that and waste their time, but that doesn't seem to be a good answer.
No, sir, it doesn't. And why you find that is because that detail is left up to the rulemaking authority, and the rulemaking authority is the commissioner and the Texas Education Agency. They are tasked by the legislature to implement this accountability and assessment system. So that was more of a staff decision, if you will, that was made. And that's, I think, you will find the education code silent on seventh graders, whether they have to take, seventh grade math or if while they're enrolled in algebra or geometry courses. So that is, we get the opportunity to provide feedback on those rules as they are written through the Texas Register, and please know that we do when these rules come up. I believe where we are right now with our current iteration of the accountability system is the commissioner is trying to keep the same standards in place for 3 to 5 years, try to keep some consistency because there has been changing in the interpretation of those. But that would be the area, Mr. Harris, where the avenue we would go down to address that particular issue.
Okay.
I think it's important that you you oppose the A through F campus district ratings, but we need to put that we do embrace the community-based accountability. I think it's important for them to see that we do have an alternative for that. And, I guess you would go to the rule makers about the fact that they throw out questions that then that everybody answers correctly after the test is taken. I don't understand that either. I don't know if that can be, if that's addressed here or with the rule makers again.
That's a different level. That's the psychometricians. And yeah, I
See that?
Yeah, I will try that next meeting. I'll have that for you.
So we talked a little bit about accountability systems, our belief in the community-based accountability systems, our opposition to A through F. We talked a little bit about the standards, trying to reduce those. So teachers can teach in greater depth, students can learn in greater depth, and a little bit of a reduction of state tests that are being offered. Anything else in the assessment accountability system area? Something we've been advocating for a number of years. Mr. Harris, to your point about statistical sampling for that, I believe that has been put forward in previous legislative sessions. It may have even been one of our legislative priorities, and maybe back in 15 or 13, I cannot remember. But if that's something that we want to include, we can certainly come back and look at that.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to provide more meaningful local control, kind of a umbrella term here. Only have 2 things on here, but this is not just for school districts. I think this is really a nod to both our role as local government, as a political subdivision of the state here in College Station ISD, but our brethren in the city and in the county. Especially thinking about the constraints that cities and counties have to endure if they were to have appraisal or revenue caps for local governments. Living here in College Station, which is a growing community, if City of College Station, Brazos County were to have appraisal revenue caps, it would severely hamper their ability to provide critical infrastructure that would impact College Station ISD. As we grow and we add campuses, there's a need for roads, there's a need for additional police, additional fire stations. As A&M continues to get bigger, as this community continues to grow, that would certainly hamper the city and the county's ability to do that, and would have a detrimental impact, in my opinion, on school kids in College Station ISD. So I threw that as some language in there for your discussion or consideration. Is that something we would want to advocate for on behalf of the entire community? So that's what number 1 is. Number 2, we will see any number of bills, as we have in the past 2 or 3 legislative sessions, to change ballot language for things like school bonds and those types of things. We are committed in College Station ISD to giving our voters the very best information possible. That's why we take our website and we put a tremendous amount of information on there. I'd encourage anybody who's listening to go back and look at our 2015 bond election site, look at our 2013 bond election site. I believe they can still access that, Chuck, at bond.csisd.org. You can see the type of information that we put on there, how we compare to districts that are similar to us, how we compare to growing districts, how much of an impact is projected on the houses of various different appraisals. So we have that. We believe that the moment for study is prior to going into the voting booth, but the moment for decision is when you're actually there to be able to make a decision. I said that as a backdrop to say that any election or transparency statutes that affect ballot language, that we would advocate that they would be the same type of language would be applicable to all levels of government, starting at the state, including local and municipalities as well as school districts. So that if it's good for school districts, it would be good for other levels of government as well.
Oh, I like that, because I've tried to read some of the things that have been on the ballot. And they're difficult, not ours, but other ones. So I think what's good for us should be good for all levels, state, county, and local.
Okay.
Now, but let's be careful. I don't want it to be seen as if we're opposed to transparency. I think you're right in that our track record shows that we're not. I mean, and anything that improves transparency, quite frankly, is better. But I have seen in the past sometimes rules that are, at least in theory, geared towards improving transparency actually just create a bunch of requirements that don't actually do that and in fact can be counterproductive. So I think that's something we need to be careful about, is not appearing as being opposed to transparency.
And absolutely, we are not. We are committed to that in this school district, as we talked about with our election websites and just in general. So that's words are important. So if we want to change words on this, let's talk about them over the next month and bring back different language if we think we need to. Okay. And the last section that we have here is providing for the needs of current and retired teachers and staff. So this is really about teacher retirement system and the pensions that are available for our currently retired teachers and those who will be teachers and staff of public schools, and the health care that is provided by TRS as well. So we've got 4 bullets on here. First one is to increase state support of the teacher retirement system pension to ensure that the system remains solvent and provides for all retirees. I heard a statistic one time that 1 in every 10 Texans is impacted by TRS. Either they are a member of TRS or have a parent or a grandparent or a child or a brother or sister that's under the TRS system. TRS also covers, Texas A&M University employees and others as well. So it's a very large system. And so we would love to see the state increase their funding of that, and so that it remains solvent into the years and meets the needs of all current and future retirees. Along with that, we would want the state to continue the current defined benefit pension program for TRS members and resist the urge to change to a defined contribution plan. Defined benefit is your traditional pension, where retirees are guaranteed a level of support during their retirement years on a monthly basis. TRS is not indexed for inflation. It does not go up, except for every once in a while when the legislature gives additional appropriations for it. But it is a guaranteed, it's something that teachers can and staff members can count upon in their retirement years. A defined contribution plan, as you are aware of, is more of a 401k or 403b plan, where the state would guarantee the amount that would be put into that, which could go up and down in future years. And it would be up to the employee to manage those assets and determine determining what their retirement might look like based on the amount of contributions they're able to make and how they're able to manage that over the years. So it would be at least the administration's contention that as people get into public education, there are a lot of positives in it. There's one of the positives that they get is a guaranteed pension. And there are fewer and fewer of those going on these days. So that's what we have in item number 2. Item number 3 would be to increase, now we're talking about healthcare. Increase state funding to assist with the increased healthcare costs associated with both TRS Active Care and TRS Care. Just a reminder that TRS Active Care is what College Station ISD employees are under now. either that or Scott and White or the options that we have locally here. So that's for our currently employed folks here in CSISD. TRS Care is for our retired folks in the state. So healthcare costs are increasing for all segments, whether retiree or current folks inside the system. So we would advocate for increasing state funding to address those needs. And then finally, advocate for alternatives to the TRS active care that would provide additional options to districts while sustaining the current system for those districts that remain in the system. This is the one that I have the least confidence and don't know exactly where I am on this. And so let me talk just a little bit about this. TRS, right now, CSISD is a member of the TRS active care system. We made a decision. We were able to get into that in the early 2000s. I can't remember if it was 2003, 2004. We were able to do that because state law allowed us to be able, we got to a sufficient size and number of employees that they would allow us to join. You may recall, it's getting quite a long time ago now. When I started in 2000, we were a self-funded program. And through the first few years I was here, 01, 02, during that particular time, the school district, the board was having to offset overruns in that program to the tune of about $500,000, $750,000 a year because of the increasing cost of health care at that time. The board and the administration at that time decided to make the decision whenever we could get into TRS active care, we would do so. And we were able to do that in the mid-2000s. Under current law, we cannot get out. We are locked into that system. There was a number of bills that went through the process in 2017 that would allow districts to get out. One bill that made it pretty far down the process would have kicked districts above a certain employee count out of TRS and allowed them to go on their own open market or force them to go upon the open market. This is a difficult one. We have a responsibility, obviously, to the employees of College Station ISD. I also feel somewhat of a responsibility for public school teachers and employees all across the state. If we get into a system and where only large districts or those who live in areas where there is choice can exercise that choice, the only folks who will be left in the TRS active care system will be those districts that have too few employees or employees who have too many risk factors to be able to compete on the open market. And it'll turn into the health insurance of last resort of TRS would turn into that potentially. So I'd really like to have a discussion either this month or next month, what your thoughts are on that, and give you some time to think about that. If we had the opportunity, would we like that opportunity to shop for better rates? Would we even be able to get better rates on the open market, or would we just get the introductory rates for a year or two and then they would get jacked up to much higher than what we were seeing in TRS active care? So, as I said, these are just discussion points to start a conversation with the board. So I wanted to throw that discussion point out there, not knowing exactly where I fall on it at this particular point.
Could you not advocate for the state to help with the TRS active care to make it more affordable to the districts versus us? I understand where you're coming from. Is if we all are in it together and they're helping fund that at a rate where we could all share the cost across, which I know is thinking, but just the TRS care, even for I see it all the time now. And I especially see it with our retired teachers and what they can afford and what they can't afford and the choices that they have to make based on their health care because they're now on some fixed income, and what they can do and what they need to do are two different things. And it really pains me greatly to see these people who have worked hard. And, we don't have a lot to offer as far as pay for teachers, in my opinion. And the thing that would be good to them would be their retirement and being able to have that insurance afterwards. And yet that's gone away as well to them. So not only did they get paid didn't get paid, I think, for what all they do. Now this has become a lesser thing too. And so somewhere there's got to be a balance on the state's level that we're not going to have teachers if they don't do something to help our teachers either financially so that we can pay them more, which is in your first bullet points, or help them here because this is what makes it attractive and for teachers to stay long term, that they had this, and now it's become a problem to them and not being able. I mean, they're mad. I'm going to be really surprised if this part right here doesn't get some ground just from the ones that are having to deal with this exact problem. I don't think it's just going to be us as a board that is going to be advocating for this. I think these people are going to advocate for themselves because they're plenty upset, and they're really having to take lesser care when they need more care because of what's happened. And they didn't even know. It's funny, they come in with these different cards because it's all, some of it's different and they don't understand it because it's totally changed. So I feel bad, and I'm hoping that we can have some strong language here about the fact that we do need to take care of them, and we can all take care of everyone together if we're one big. You're not going to tell me that somebody's not going to, all these insurance companies like bigger companies to.
Bigger risk pools?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so it seems to me like they could shop around for us in that regard as well. But I don't know how we do that. I don't know that we're going to have to do a lot here. I'm telling you, there are plenty of people I deal with daily that are angry. And I don't blame them because it's confusing on top of everything else. And that's healthcare in general, but it particularly is to them because it's changed. Their cards have changed in the last. They don't just hand you a Medicare card anymore. It's a different deal. And
yes,
so
ma'am.
they're very confused. And I hate that for them. I hate for these people that have worked hard, our kids, and I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
Healthcare is difficult.
It is.
The rising cost of healthcare are hitting everyone. And so I don't know if there's any industry that's immune to that. And so how do we deal with that from a systemic point of view? And what does that look like for TRS Active Care and certainly for our retirees on TRS Care? Yes, ma'am. So those are the five areas that we had talked about with some draft language in there, bullet points. Love feedback. If you've got any feedback as you ruminate on this a little bit in the next few days or weeks, if you would send that to me, I'd like to put that on the agenda at our October meeting as well and maybe be able to move forward at that time because then it'll be, before we know it, it'll be time to talk with our elected representatives in advance of the 86th legislative session and be able to advocate for the needs of the school district.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we done with that one? Okay. C3, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the elementary school boundary adjustment process and timeline. Dr. Ely.
Mr. President, members of the board, we talked about this at our August meeting, talked about a tentative timeline for elementary school boundary adjustment. Just remind everyone that we're talking about elementary schools K through fourth grade for the opening, to accommodate the opening of Riverbend Elementary School. We had thrown the ideas out and it looked like they would work for everyone, that Monday evenings would work for specially called workshops for the discussion and working through the various scenarios. So we have those up there. Those are the ones shaded in yellow. Those are on Mondays, Monday, October the 1st, October the 8th, October 15th, October 22nd, and October 29th. And those last few would be if needed, if action wasn't taken prior to that. Since we talked about 5:30 at that time, since that time, I've been contacted by a member of the board that we would need to move those to 6. So want to see if that will work with everyone still. And we also talked about having 2 public hearings after the very first session, which would be on Monday, October the 1st, come back later on that week on noon on Wednesday, October 3rd, and then in the evening on Thursday, October the 4th. To talk about public hearing in response to a scenario or scenarios that would have been shared with the board at that first meeting on Monday the 1st. So what we talked about last month was having you approve these dates and times. And so we would be looking for action on this particular item. Do all of those still look good for everybody in your schedule as you know today?
Anyone have a problem with it? Yeah, no, I know.
The Thursday, October the 4th public hearing, would you like to move that earlier, later to accommodate anybody's schedule? Are we good? We'd moved the other ones to 6 o'clock, so I don't know if 5:30 is still good.
I'm good.
Again, we'd be looking for approval if that is suitable to the members of the board.
So we need a motion.
I move to approve the adjustment workshops and hearings on the dates as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, that takes us to item C4, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the 2017-2018 Birth to 5 Head Start self-assessment. Dr. Ely.
Mr. Harris, members of the board, as you know, we work in a great partnership with the Head Start program here in College Station ISD. And as a federal program, the Head Start program is subject to a number of different assessments and accountability processes. This, what we're speaking to you tonight are the results from a 2017-18 Birth to 5 Head Start self-assessment. So we'll go over briefly those results and then talk about goals that will be moving forward based on those results. So with that presentation is Dr. Penny Trammell, Chief Academic Officer. Dr. Trammell.
Good evening. We are required to annually assess. I'm trying to get Clark. Can't use the mouse. To assess our program, we use an instrument called a self-assessment given to us by the Birth to 5 Head Start program. The purpose of this is to look at our service quality, look at our work performance, and to look at items that might inform us as to program improvement.
Roll it.
Yeah, I did.
Roll it that way.
Yeah, got it. Okay. These are just a few of the categories, or quite a few of the categories actually, in the self-assessment that we use. We use a variety of sources, parent surveys, data from assessment with students. And at this time, I want to share with you results from our April assessment with our young learners so that you can see where we are academically with our Head Start, our Birth to 5 Head Start program. As you look at this handout, you'll notice that in mathematics, we definitely have room for improvement. It is highlighted in yellow. When we look deeply at our data, the area of mathematics that we need to attend to in our curriculum and in our classrooms deals with shapes and measurement. Also, what we would call the connecting level for young children. And what that means is if I have a set of 4, I can identify that that is a set of 4 and connect that to the number 4. So it is an emergent skill for mathematics. In the area of literacy, you will notice that we have some work to do on identifying and naming letters. So the difference in that would be if I say point to the letter B, a student could do that, but can they name the letter B? So it's identifying and naming. Writing to convey meaning, things like rhymes and alliteration, expressive language, retelling a story. So we need to provide many opportunities for them to retell a story, and hopefully stories that relate to their culture and experiences. So this just gives you a glance at our academic data. I will say prior to this past year, we didn't really have consistent data to where we could do a comparative analysis from year to year. We standardized that last year, so this April, we will actually be able to look at our 3-year-old data and look at that cohort of students in the 4-year-old program and can do a comparative analysis because our assessments will be the same. So that will be great information to inform greater improvement in our program. As we look at our strengths of some of the things that we accomplished last year, we were able to revise our policy to provide more timely notification and acceptance of students into the program. Feedback from parents indicated that the Barbara Bush Parent Center has an adequate play space and that it is well used. Families were in general satisfied with the services of our program, and we were able to establish some policy for consistency in attendance amongst our elementary schools that house our program. Our areas for improvement that we've identified are in the area of professional development, family services, and international students. When we look at professional development, we will be providing training on linguistically and culturally appropriate materials and how to use those in the classroom to address some of the needs in some of our data. We will also receive training on serving students with special needs, behavior management strategies, and that can contribute to maximizing instructional time, cultivating environments to promote positive mental health, and training on trauma-informed care. Family services, essentially, this is just making sure that we are timely in gathering strengths and interest of our families, providing them assistance with paperwork, to help volunteer in our schools, services in other languages, being sensitive to the cultural differences, additional attendance supports based on the policy that was developed last year. We've revised our parenting classes to be more engaging in response to parent feedback. The partnership form is easy to fill out, and then just greater opportunity for parent input as we have events. Under international students or diverse students, we will be obtaining those cultural and linguistic materials in order for them to strengthen instruction in the classroom. And we will have hopefully greater access to home language materials for the different languages represented in our program. That concludes our self-assessment. So it is a requirement that the board annually approves the self-assessment done on the Birth to 5 Head Start program, And so at this time, we would come to you for a motion of approval of our self-assessment.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, discussion?
I would move that we approve the Birth to 5 Head Start Program 2017-2018 self-assessment.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Harris, that's it. Just a reminder that we are back at 6:45 6:45
Okay,
for public hearing.
okay. So with that, the workshop is adjourned.